Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our HackerEarth virtual panel discussion on university hiring in 2020 and beyond. It is of great pleasure that you all could join us today, a topic that is being much talked about around the globe, not just specific to any particular geographies, but we have been hit by a pandemic and processes have to change. University recruiting is one of the things that has been impacted big time. So before we start off, here are our panel members for today. First one being Alan Fuller, who is the talent acquisition manager at W.E. O'Neill, one of the biggest construction companies in the US. He comes with a recruiting background of 20 years. That's almost 2 decades. He's been recruiting top talent for multiple companies over the years. Second on the panel, we have Stephanie Steele, who is the campus recruiting and university relations manager at Rapid7, hiring university folks for the last 7 years. She has previously been with Epsilon and is currently working with Rapid7. The third panel member for today's panel discussion is Sivona Blake. She is the Assistant Vice President and Senior Diversity Campus Recruiter with Citi, one of the largest financial institutions globally. And we are glad to have all 3 of them. Along with them, we have Sachin Gupta, who is the CEO and co-founder at HackerEarth, and he'll be moderating today's session. Here are a few ground rules before we start off with the panel discussion. This session is being recorded, so in case you miss out on anything, you don't need to worry about that. We will be sharing the recording of today's panel discussion with all of you in the next 24 hours. So we are open for questions as well throughout this panel discussion. Anytime you have any question for a particular panel member, please feel free to ask that question in the questions panel. The questions panel can be found on your GoToWebinar setup on the right-hand side. You can just type in your questions and we'll be monitoring them from the backend. Last but not the least, please do share your feedback about today's panel discussion on LinkedIn and Twitter by tagging HackerEarth as well as the panel members. And you can just share your experience and how you found today's session. So without further ado, we'll start off with our panel discussion today. Over to you, Sachin, now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the discussion today. I know it's a topic that's been on top of mind for a lot of us ever since we've gone into the pandemic. Every process in terms of recruitment has undergone massive change, and university recruiting is something that's been it has been in flux for a lot of folks. As you can't really visit the universities. Your hiring numbers may have gone for a toss. So all the plans that we kind of started the year with, they're all up in the air now. And as we wade through this uncertainty, as we try and adjust ourselves to what I would like to call as the new normal, I believe there are going to be some indelible changes, indelible impact on the way we conduct recruiting in general. And then, of course, a subset of that is how do we go ahead, continue doing university hiring, not just in 2020 and beyond. So my personal take is remote hiring is going to be the norm going forward as well. And even if we all go back to the offices, we will have certain parts of the process which will continue to be being remote. Now, the jury is still out what that impact would be on university hiring, and that's one of the things that we want to discuss today in this panel. So with that, I welcome all the panel members to join in, and we can start off the discussion. Hey guys, excited to have you.
Hey, good to see everybody.
Thanks for having us.
So yeah, let's start off. The questions will be directed at each panel member, so I'll just call out. So Stephanie, let's begin with you. In your experience, and this may not have anything to do with the COVID impact, but in general, how difficult or easy is it to hire early talent as compared to more experienced one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, the biggest piece about early career talent is that you're looking for a potential more than you're looking for, skills and experience for someone who has maybe like 10, 20 years of experience in industry. So a lot of times people will say, well, it's easier. But then you add in the volume and you add in the fact that we're choosing the people that are going to sort of, lead the company someday and that are sort of going to emerge. And we want them to stay with us. So I think going after them in a hand-picked approach is a lot more important, because we're trying to get them to stay. We're trying to groom them the way that we want. And so I don't want to say it's harder or easier than experienced talent, but I do think that it has its own challenges.
Got it. So if I got it correctly, you're saying that one is obviously the volume aspect of it. The other is you're trying to hire for future potential, because you don't really expect people to have, maybe demonstrable signals of the skills at that point in time. And then, of course, you want to make sure whoever you get on board, you keep them engaged.
Right. And then I think the other piece of it is you're looking for, you have a time limit, I guess, is like the easiest way to say it. So, there's certain times where university recruiting is super heavy, and you have this certain window of time where you're going to go get, your best talent. And then there's a certain window of time when that's passed and you don't have that opportunity anymore, as opposed to experience hiring. Sometimes, you could argue that you're always going to be able to find somebody, depending on what time of the year it is or something like that, which isn't the same for university hiring, in my experience.
Gotcha, makes sense. Alan, what's your take on that? What's been your experience in terms of university versus lateral hiring?
Well, I agree with Stephanie that you're hiring for potential and you're hiring for attributes, and where finding a mid to senior level person is something we always are looking for. Where when you are talking about the university experience, you're talking about a whole bunch of people coming out, graduating in, for us, May, June. You're talking about interns for the summer are usually completed, offer and acceptance sometime by the holidays. So I think that the changes that are going to be happening, at least from the college perspective, is, to Stephanie's point, is going to be on the company to utilize the virtual processes now to take a little more time and be a little more aware of trying to discover that potential and discover those attributes and discover, is this a person that has what we're looking for to grow, as opposed to being career fair and an on-campus interview.
Gotcha. So, you both of you brought up a very relevant point, that you're hiring for potential, and we all love a face-to-face conversation, and that's when we really naturally we get to understand people better. Now that's not going to happen, right? So how do you see that becoming? Does that become harder in a virtual setting?
I don't know if the term would be harder. I think it becomes different, where everybody now has gotten used to videos, Zooms, what have you. And I think what it is now is us needing to be able to pay more attention to maybe listen a little bit better with our ears and eyes, and potentially come up with other ways of interviewing and interacting with them. This has also flipped everything on its head. It's also created an interesting opportunity that now maybe you get to reach out to other universities that you haven't before, and now you can do it virtually. You may not have to travel as much, so now you have time to maybe try another university.
Makes sense. So, Siwana, this one is for you. Given that a lot of us are going to continue being remote, even if not fully, partially the workforce will be remote. How do you see the whole campus hiring strategy changing in the new, as we say, the new normal?
I definitely agree and want to piggyback on what Alan said. Just being able to reach out to schools, that's something that I've been trying to focus on as we go into recruiting season, is just making sure that we're focusing on schools we never focused on before. Before, you kind of had the excuse of like, well, we're going to this school, we're going to that school. And now is a time where we can break into schools that we haven't necessarily had a chance to break into, and we can reach out to those students. So instead of me doing a webinar just for a specific college, I can focus on maybe all HBCUs instead of just going to one HBCU, going to Howard. So that's kind of how it's changing. I think that now is the time where we can reach more students, and we can utilize these webinars and virtual platforms to do so.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So just to follow up on that, when you try and cast a wider net, would your strategy be okay, we've gone to 10 campuses in the past, let's add, 50, 10 more or 5 more? Or would you lean towards a strategy where you say, let's open it up to anybody? Maybe we put a geography filter. We say all the universities on the East Coast or on the West Coast, something like that. So which one of these two do you seem to be leaning towards today?
I'm definitely seeing being a little bit more open is working. It's allowing us to gain more candidates in places that we wouldn't have necessarily traditionally looked. So it allows us to move less towards like target schools. Like while we're still looking at our target schools, it allows us to open to talent that we necessarily might miss because we didn't initially have it on the 10 schools that we would be traveling to.
Got it. Got it. So the next one is for you, Alan, and there are two flavors to this. The question is, how does one design an effective campus hiring strategy? And I would love if you could give a perspective on what used to happen, last year, and what are some of the things you see changing going forward?
Good question. So last year, I think it was a little bit more traditional. We go to the career fairs, twice a year. Obviously, then we also do other activities. We do information sessions, on-campus interviews. We might do small group gatherings with either the majors themselves, the student associations. I think how it's changing is that, and I've heard from my teammates that I think what they're doing is they're doing more virtual. They're doing more, I'll say, more intimate gatherings. I think that there's also, I think, again, an opportunity here is, I think for an info session, it used to be, and I'd like to hear from the others, is one of the ways to attract is you bring the pizza and sodas and you get more people. Well, now I think you're going to you may have a smaller group attending, but that'll be a greater concentration with a much better yield for you. And I think that the other thing we're looking at is a number of the universities have already sort of got their processes in place, and others, they're still trying to figure it out even now to the fall career fairs. So some of them, they've kind of done it seamlessly and it's been great. They've adjusted, we're adjusting with them. And others we're sort of saying, hey, can you let us know how you want to do this? Because we're on board. We just want to get going. We want to start announcing it and reaching out.
Got it. So now what's your take on that? What's been your strategy? What have been the key components of your university recruiting strategy in the past, and how is that changing?
Yeah, definitely, like Alan said, you get a lot of students that are a little bit more intentional about the company and the programs that we have. Because when you're coming with pizza and soda, students are just going to naturally go because they're hungry. So a big part of our strategy that we kind of focus on is just creating programs for students above just like internship programs. So allowing them to learn something and take away a value of something without necessarily doing a program. So if they don't go to City, they at least learn something from City. So we have programs like Freshman Discovery program where students come, usually this year was virtually, it already happened, but it's usually within the city office. They're learning technical skills, speaking to senior leaders. So this way you're engaging students early, and that's kind of how we try to go about our strategy, by engaging students from the beginning of their time within college, and then allowing them to really make a choice once they get into their junior year, but kind of engaging them early, giving them tools and supporting them and nurturing them from the beginning. So when it comes to their junior year and they're looking for an internship, they know I've done this program before. I know what this company's about, and this is how I can move with it to an internship position at this company.
Gotcha, that makes sense. So Stephanie, for you, what's been the remote university hiring strategy? And let me put the question that, do you think in the long run is that even sustainable? Like, of course, today we have to do it. We have no other option. But is this something you would want to continue doing later on as well?
Yeah. So similar to Alan and Savona's responses, we're still targeting particular universities, but then we're able to cast a wider net and go to different schools that we haven't gone to before. Also have more sort of like intimate gatherings with student groups and things like that. So we're able to be a little bit more targeted than just sort of like, hey, we have an event, come get pizza, and just anyone shows up. So very similar strategies when it comes to that. The other piece of it that I just wanted to add that I've just heard from other colleagues in campus recruiting is we've always been focused on, you know, an event-based approach when it comes to college recruiting, being on campus at certain times of the year and getting those students, that's sort of like the start of your funnel, and then going down from there. Now it's almost like, and to go to another extreme, it's almost like we have to go towards a more sourcing approach, where even if you have events, it's like, okay, well, how are you going to get people to come to them? Because it's not just a culture that we're on campus and, oh, there's a career fair today, everyone's going to the career fair. So it's around like sourcing, whether it's for invites to your event or to invite to apply to your job, where we really haven't had to be sourcers before in the campus world. And that's, I think, a trend that we're seeing. And then to answer your second question about just, is this sustainable? I don't have a crystal ball. I can't make a prediction, but I'm gonna have to say that if we go through like an academic year of this and doing remote, I have a feeling that we're never going to go back to that traditional model. I don't think that it was sustainable. I think also with diversity in mind, it's not sustainable to have a list of, you know, target schools, because think about how narrow your candidate pool is when you have that. So I just think we're all going to see a lot of great benefits from this remote model, diversity being a huge one. And I can't imagine that our, you know, executives and leadership is going to say, let's go back to that more narrow approach. I just don't see that happening. I think maybe a hybrid model, but I do think that this remote model is sustainable for sure.
I think that's a brilliant point that you brought up from a diversity angle, that even though you know, we may feel that the engagement and the interactions with the students are not as good as they used to be in the traditional model, there are definite advantages of being able to, you know, go to a much larger university pool purely from a diversity perspective. And in the long run, the advantage of doing something like this weighs over the, you know, some of the disadvantages or poor experience we might, you know, be delivering today. And of course, over a period of time, we'll figure out how to make that experience delightful as well. So, you know, kind of picking on from that, Simona, we've spoken about, you know, being able to get pizzas and sodas and getting people into the room. Now, obviously, that's not happening, and we've spoken about few focus group discussions. But then, how do you really replicate that feeling? Yeah, you know, video is great. We're all used to doing Zoom all throughout the day, but the fact is there is a Zoom fatigue that kicks in. And you know, if you're a student sitting at your home, not in the university, that feeling is not there. Okay, hey, let's go in and sit in a session series on campus. Now it's, I would have it in my calendar. I may or may not join in. I may be distracted, right? So how do you create that connect virtually? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I would say adding a value piece of just not it being an informational session to students is important. So a lot of times when I do webinars that are information sessions, I try to add a value piece of just, if we have some city employees that would like to join as panelists that went to that school potentially, if there's a senior leader that could join, adding them to the panel, or them and having them do a fireside chat, or even if it's like making it a network session for students as well. Adding like a value piece so students are just not sitting through like a boring informational session, but giving them something where they can have a key takeaway besides just like hearing me or another recruiter talk about a specific business function, because it gets boring. And if they're doing it for the city, they're doing it for multiple other companies. So making sure that they can take something tangible and not just like some information that was thrown at them is a way that I feel like you can engage students virtually.
Got it. And are you still doing that as, you know, like we spoke about earlier, that university recruiting happens in as a specific event. So are you still doing that as part of that event, or do you foresee that being spread throughout the year?
Yeah, so still doing that as part of events. And yeah, I foresee us doing that.
Got it. So the next one is for you, Alan. What do you think from a talent acquisition perspective are clear advantages of moving to a remote university recruiting setup?
Well, I think we've mentioned a little bit of it already. I mean, I think we get to reach out to other schools. I also think that there's advantages to both the hiring companies, and there's opportunities to the colleges as well. I mean, the standard is for tech in Los Angeles, they go to the named universities. Well, we also look at the smaller universities. We look at where the best people are that fit our culture. And I think that that's going to be able to expand that, where if we discover, hey, there's this school in, I don't know, Nebraska, where for some reason a whole bunch of either people that would be of interest to us, or for some reason a whole bunch of Southern California people go to and then return, well, now we can start building a relationship there and go from there. I also think on the college side, for anybody listening that works at a college career center, this is a big opportunity for them, where Stephanie said we have to be sourcers. Well, they also have to start going out, and they can now reach out to a broader, they can reach out to City, they can reach out to Rapid 7, they can reach out to O'Neill and say, hey, we've got these types of engineers in majors. We'd love to start building a relationship with you, where in the past we might say, yeah, but we're not traveling to Nebraska. We've already got our 12 schools, but now we can do it virtually. And to Savona's point, and we do this at career fairs, we pretty much all the time grab somebody we have working for us that graduated from that school and say, come on with us. So I think there are adjustments. I do think that the virtual, to Stephanie's early point, will become a majority of it. I think then it will have, the market will have to kind of find its level watermark of, okay, we're still going to go to these schools. They're close. They're always key for us. We have a good relationship. And then with others, we have a good relationship, and it makes better sense to do virtual. And it's going to find that level watermark.
Gotcha. So just to follow up on that, if you go to more schools, obviously the top of the funnel increases. So do you foresee that volume posing operational challenges for you?
I think for somebody like us, it'll cause a little bit of a challenge, because increased volume is increased work, and that's fine though. I also wonder if, back to the quality of candidates, are we going to now have, maybe, let's say, instead of 100 people coming to the info session, now we get 30 virtual, but those 30 are really in the ballpark. Well, now that's 70 I don't have to worry about screening. Now, if we all of a sudden, now I get 100 in total that are of that quality, yeah, it's additional work, but nice nightmare to have at that point. And now if we are dealing with other schools, we can reach out to schools including more diversity. And maybe, I think with all of us, there's people that go to school all places throughout the country, but maybe they want to come back home. Well, now maybe they discover us, or they discover Rapid 7, or they discover City has a corporate presence close by their home, and now they might not have ever heard of it because they're going to school across the country.
Right. That's interesting. And so what you're saying is that while the volume may increase, there is an element of self-selection that comes into the whole virtual engagement. So the quality, you don't expect the quality to really, quality to increase. So you're in a better position. You've got a higher quality talent pool to depend to, and that's every recruiter's dream, right? Being able to cast a net, but still have the quality in place.
But I also think it will be an advantage to smaller and mid-sized colleges and universities that now they'll actually be able to, if their career centers start reaching out and they start doing this, they're going to now have a competitive advantage, and they'll be raising it where it's like, hey, we have City coming here, or maybe they're a small, it's a very highly respected technical major in Alabama, and now you've got the ability to get those people. And the colleges need to start reaching out to City and Rapid 7 and O'Neill, and we've got, hey, Alan, we've got civil engineers, and so-and-so's got this, and so-and-so's got that.
Got it. So Stephanie, this one's for you. There are some hurdles that that one would encounter when taking university recruiting remote, and we've talked a little bit about how do we engage people now that we're not there face to face. But what about the rest of the recruiting process? Typically career fairs would have some kind of screening upfront. Then you kind of shortlist people and maybe do a remote phone screen. Then some companies try to fly over the shortlisted folks to the headquarters. Some of them actually do the majority of the process during the career fair itself. So what's been your approach in the past, and what kind of challenges do you see in that part of the process going forward?
Yeah, so the one thing that sticks out to me as like a big hurdle and change is traditionally a lot of companies have done on-campus interviews. And so that's really compelling for students because if they see, I've heard from multiple students that if they see a company is coming to campus doing interviews, they're more apt to apply to that company than just one that's like posting jobs. So that's always a competitive advantage that companies have had that we no longer have. And I think from what I've experienced so far, a lot of schools are still encouraging you to do an on-campus interview schedule, but it's just going to be remote this time. But that's a huge hurdle because you don't get that advantage to say like, hey, we came here because we love students at this school and university. That I think is one big hurdle. The other hurdle, and this is very specific to Rapid7, traditionally we've always brought people to our offices. We have really beautiful office spaces, and that's a disadvantage now. So we have great people that can be engaging over an interview or an info session, but we have to figure out ways to show our office, but you also come with the challenge of like, here's our beautiful office that we have no idea when you'll work there. So it's that, those are like the two big things to me that are hurdles that we're trying to get over right now, in terms of this remote setting.
Yeah. I think the last point about not being able to get people into the office, I think I've been part of multiple panel discussions, and every recruiter has said that that puts them in a big disadvantage because
Yeah.
closing the candidate. This was one of the things that they would use all the time in closing the candidate, and it makes sense. You step into the office, you get a vibe of the company, you get to meet people, and all of that is you can't replicate that virtually. So we'll all of us will have to figure out a way for doing that in the long run.
Yeah, and I think too, like what I was saying about, so even if we figured out a way to do it virtually, a few months ago, I was thinking, great, we'll just do virtual office tours and we can get them excited about the office. But now we're in this place where it's like, when are we going to be back there? And so is it even worth bragging about your office when like we should probably just be selling the remote experience, because that's what we're trying to get people to do right now. So it's really tough.
And here's one to think about, because what I've been hearing from architecture firms is, again, there'll be a level watermark, is when we all shut down, everybody was remote, and the thinking is everyone's remote. What the architects are saying right now is they're getting a lot of business on redesigning and reconfiguring the office space. So I think there might be, everybody thought, oh, well, Alan, Savone, and Stephanie, they just want to work remote for the rest of their lives. And what we've been experiencing and hearing is, especially in the tech sector, is they say, yeah, I like working remote, but I think I want the option of maybe coming in half the time. And so hopefully, Stephanie, you'll be able to continue to show that beautiful office reconfigured in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So that's a great perspective. So doubling down a little bit on tech hiring. So a lot of our attendees in the discussion today, some of them specialize on tech hiring within university hiring. And in the earlier we spoke about hiring for potential in terms of early talent. So how does that translate into tech hiring? Like, how do you define potential when you're doing tech hiring? Maybe Sivana, we can start with you on this particular question.
Sorry, I missed the first part. It broke up a little bit for me.
Yeah, I was saying that we discussed that in university hiring, you're hiring for potential, right? Now, if I were to put a screen of tech on top of it, so how do you define potential in terms of tech hiring? What are the attributes? What are the things that you look for in tech candidates?
And tech candidates. I definitely, going back to something Stephanie mentioned before, looking at the potential. I think when it comes to tech talent, I've helped to recruit on a professional level, and I've done it for campus. Something I've noticed on the professional level is a lot of people look for people to be already made in tech. And this is also from a diversity standpoint. So people are always coming and they're like, I want minority talent that is senior level within tech. And I'm like, well, that doesn't exist as much as you think it does. And if it does, you're not the only person that wants them. 30 people want them. So when it comes to campus hiring, something I look for is like potential, and being able to provide this, or having a student that all they need is the resources, and then they'll be able to build from there. Because when they get to a higher level, people are going to be looking for them, and people are going to be seeking them very often. So my thing is just like looking for potential, looking for students. They don't have to be perfect when they get there, but just being able to look for students that all they need is the support, and they'll be able to be rock stars. They'll be able to very much do well in a tech career. So I definitely think just looking at the potential of students that really care, that also join a lot of our programs that are tech focused. That's always a good thing, because that shows that they want to advance their technical skills also. So that's really how we look at tech talent.
Got it. Any specific technique or trick that has worked for you when trying to measure potential? Because it could be a tricky thing, right? A few hours of conversation, you could go right or wrong. It's hard to predict that. But anything that's worked for you in terms of measuring that potential?
I think just looking at students and seeing what kind of different programs they already know, what programs they're looking to do, and if we can support those things that they're looking for. That's kind of how I say I go about it, just because I feel like a lot of times people want like tech students to be very perfect. So just really like looking at like, what do you already know, and what are you trying to learn? If we can help you with the skills that you need to learn, then you're right, and you're going to be able to fit in, and you'll be able to be successful here. But I would never want to just like set a student up and know that we can't provide them the resources that they need, and then they're failing
Right.
at role. So that's kind of how I go about it.
Got it. Alan, what's your take? What are some of the attributes that you look for in tech hiring during universities?
Forgive me, but I'm going to have to humbly object to your comment tricks, because I think that as an experienced recruiter, when I'm looking for somebody, I'm just going to say I know it when I see it, and I don't necessarily think it's just technology. I think it's any technical aspect of any job. So in finance, a finance student, it would be the technical aspects of finance. In civil engineering, it would be a couple of technical aspects, but what I'm looking for is I'm looking for their communication skills. I'm looking for their associations. I'm looking for how they interact with me. I'm looking for, I happen to remember one student that he did something with some little screen that came on a rare keyboard, and he liked writing code for it, and somebody told him, you do realize you're probably the world's expert on that right now. And he communicated well and this and that. Now, I didn't have a place for him, but I referred him to Google and they interviewed him. And so it's that attributes. And when you're looking for potential, I think I'm looking personally for their communication ability, the story of their earlier stories of maybe part-time jobs or experiences they've had, and they're able to communicate that. I think that's across the board, because sooner or later, if they've got potential, they're going to move into management, and moving into management is a big jump from doing technical tasks to managing people. And if I can see, if my team can see, we can see that, the glimmer of that, that's something we really key on.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So communication is so what you're saying is essentially, is there a story behind the person, right? And are you able to get that story and see how it could potentially fit at your workplace, and they could grow if that story gives you a sense of how they would grow in the organization? That's a very valid point. So moving on to the next question. Stephanie, let's start with you. Is the majority of your early talent hiring done solely from universities, or do you have other strategies in place as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Rapid7 is in a unique place where we're just sort of starting out in the last few years with our college recruiting strategies. So we're in a unique space where we're kind of building this as things are changing and evolving in the campus recruiting space. So I just started at Rapid7 in April, and that's part of my job, is to kind of roll out what our strategy is. And I think if you asked me back in February what it would be, it'd be like, well, we're going to go pick our target schools, and we're going to, have this super narrow approach. And now all of this is happening around us, and we're getting to change that as we build, which is great. In the past, since there hasn't been a more formalized strategy. It has been from universities as well as, partnerships with different organizations, whether they're diversity organizations or just partnerships that Rapid7 has had. And then also just pure sourcing and inbound applicants. So we're trying to kind of do a combination of those things. We want to be a little bit more targeted where we can, but also make sure that we're embracing those other partnerships and not just narrowing our approach.
Got it. For a quick follow-up on that, and maybe, Sivona, I would like your perspective on this question, and you could, include my next point in your response as well. We've seen a host of MOOCs coming up, boot camps, where people who probably have not been in tech or any other career for that matter could change their domain, and they're essentially early talent in the sense they are new to the domain, but they probably come with 5-10 years of experience doing something else. So do you guys have a strategy for that? And where do they really fit in? Do they fit in early talent hiring, or they fit in somewhere else? So maybe Stephanie could give that perspective, and then Sivona, I would love to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, it's a question that we're sort of working through right now, because I think we're in this place where we don't want to have interns that are working the whole entire year who have 5 years of experience, whether it's in something else or so we're trying to be a little bit more prescriptive about like what is an intern, and whether it has to do with their degree or how long they stay with us or whatever. But at the same time, we don't want to be too narrow and say, well, interns are only current students, because then we're not able to engage with those boot camps or career changers. And so that's an ongoing conversation that we're having right now at Rapid7, because I think, like we were just saying, a few months back we were trying to like create rules as to interns have to be current students, and if they're not, they're a contractor. But now we're posing the question of like, well, we also want to be open. And the other challenge that comes along with that, besides boot camps, is also just there is a huge deficit in terms of 2020 grads who were never employed. And so what are we doing about them? Like, our approach is that we're open to hiring them for internships and for early career opportunities, but that's a shift in terms of what we were used to before. Typically it was like, oh, you've already graduated, okay, we'll look at some more experience level roles for you. But we're needing to shift people's mindsets internally about that, because we need to make sure that we're employing those that maybe had an opportunity taken away from them.
Got it. So Sivona, what's your take on this?
We're kind of pretty much in the same place as you, Stephanie, where city's very strict on like, if you have to be a junior, and usually like with the program that you're doing, it pretty much goes into full-time, and that's who gets full-time offers. Like, yes, there's a couple spots open if you didn't necessarily intern, but for the most part, you need to intern to get a full-time offer. So right now, kind of talking through the same kind of things of like, and even down to majors of like, if you are not technically like somebody who traditionally did tech or did like computer science or engineering, like what does that look like for you when you're going through an internship program, or if you're looking to be an analyst, or if you're looking to make a career change. But right now it's pretty strict, but we're starting to ask those questions, especially with just what's going on right now. Like, there's going to be some students that may have not interned and may have not had their first job. How are we addressing that, and how are we going about that? Right now it's just kind of like you're being thrown into like a professional level role, and it may be entry level, so it doesn't really have to do with campus. But I think that having those conversations and changing those mindsets is very important, especially with the climate that we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough, valid point. And now, kind of changing gears a little bit, and we did bring this up earlier in the discussion. Diversity and inclusion has been a topic that a lot of people have been talking about. Last month we hosted a panel which was very well received, exclusively on diversity and inclusion, and different people have different perspectives. So I want to blend that in with university recruiting as well, and get your perspective, Alan. How do you put a lens of diversity and inclusion on campus recruiting?
Two comments on that. Number one, we for some of the universities that have diversity associations, we are in contact and have a relationship with them. So when there's an event, we always go to it. Now, we've always gone to them because for the second thing is, in my opinion, we hire the best person possible, and I don't care where they come from. And I'm very proud of O'Neill that I've been here for 4 years, I think next week, and we just discovered, we just did a national survey really quick, and we just noticed that we are just about 25% women as our employee base, and that's in an industry that at best is typically 9, maybe 10%. So for us, we just want to hire the best person. So we want to attract everybody. We'll go to the diverse, anything that we can get in front of a student, I'm there, and my team will go there. It doesn't matter. And if you want to separate out to diversity, I understand that, and I think that there's a great need for it. And I think it's a competitive advantage that everybody should be leveraging right now. I think there are there's great people out there in all walks of life, and we better start looking at all of them, because one thing we should all remember is before this craziness happened, we had an unemployment rate below 4%. We all know how hard it was to find good people. We all have the opportunity, and for the colleges, they have an opportunity to help us with that relationship so that we're building that long-term relationship so we can always be involved in hiring the best people from all the areas of the universities.
Got it.
And I'll add on to that. Yeah. I just think too, with diversity and inclusion, it's been a focus in campus recruiting for as long as I can remember. But it has always been, well, we go to this small little list of schools, and so we can try and target the diverse talent in that small list, but you're still narrowing your approach. So again, going back to now, we're able to cast a wider net. And therefore, we have to be thinking about, okay, well, if we go to these sort of like elite universities, who are they recruiting to go to that university? And we're just narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. So let's start to think about, and that's why I'm excited about being at Rapid 7, because as we're sort of building out our strategy, we can incorporate and think like this. Like, what about the schools that maybe like we haven't thought about going to, whether they're local or they're not? Going back to Alan's point, they're not near our office, like that's okay. But even the ones that are near our office, but we just haven't thought of them, because they have great talent too. And so I think we all have a big advantage in terms of, like, as we're reshaping our strategy and reshaping what are the schools we go to, we can make that list bigger, but we can also make it more diverse.
And
got it.
Really quick on this, I'm sorry, go ahead, Savona.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that's a really great point. That's something we're currently dealing with, because it's like you go to the schools and you're like, all right, like, let's do diversity, and then you go to 2 schools. Like for us, it's like, let's do diversity. Let's go to the 3 best HBCUs. Like I graduated from Howard, so to me, great. It's nice to go there, but there's 107 HBCUs that exist, and it's like we're not touching all those schools. We're not even touching the schools that are more diverse, like in general. So it's definitely important to just not just to go to like 2 or 3 schools, but to open your horizon, because there's a plethora of students everywhere.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd pay attention to is, to Stephanie's comment on the named universities, top 20 universities are always going to have 200 kids at the career fair out the line. And okay, that's fine, but we want to find they might have the best there. But the other thing to focus on diversity is look at the student organizations. Those are the ones that are going to be your real advantage. Yes, the university know they exist and you can ask about them, but if you can connect with those student associations, you will find very quickly which ones are run well, which ones the students run well, which ones need a little bit of help. Now, on the ones that are run well, you can start setting up relationships. On the ones that may not be run that well, you might be able to offer help on how they can run better. And now you've really got a great relationship there that might be a little gold mine of candidates for you.
That's an interesting point. So tapping into the student group. So how do you typically do that, Alan? You just like scout them on the internet, or is there a trick that you use in the past?
Well, I mean, I'm a longtime recruiter and I source as well. I'm good at stalking, so I'll go to the universe. I'll Google the university. I may Google an association name. They may have it listed someplace. Some universities do have a list of student associations that have been they're approved student organizations. If you find that list, there's a place to start. And I can tell you at one university, great example. A smaller university versus a named university, we had a need all of a sudden for 3 new entry-level hires. I sent an email to the named university and the smaller one, association. I came back about after my day thinking, I'll probably have 2 or 3 resumes. From the named university, I had 2 resumes. From the smaller association, I had 20.
Yeah.
I think that's a good tip that everybody in the audience could go back with. Thanks for that, Alan.
And one thing we're doing,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. One thing we're doing, and I think a lot of companies do too, is just leveraging the alumni from those schools at your company and saying like, hey, do you guys, were you part of any student groups? Do you have friends that were? And they can get you in touch. Because we were actually just last week having a problem. We couldn't get a hold of one of them. And then we saw that one of our alums was part of it. And so he actually got us in touch. And so yeah, leveraging alumni for that as well.
Makes sense. So Simona, your title actually says Senior Diversity Campus Recruiter. So curious to know, in addition to one of the things you mentioned is, like Stephanie also said, let's cast a wider net, look at more universities. But are there other processes or strategies that you put in place, specifically from a diversity lens?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to build strong relationships with diversity partner organizations. That's something that I come from a diversity partner organization, so I understand the importance. These organizations work super hard to build minority students and to help support them within their careers. They have numerous they have a huge network. They have numerous just different ways of helping these different students. So for us, it's important to partner with these organizations because they're already doing a lot of the work. They're already making sure that these students are prepped and prepared for not just careers, but if they would like to go and get their MBAs as well. So for me, it would make more than enough sense to partner with these organizations that are already helping out students, that already have the students that we're looking for. These students that work with organizations like Management Leadership of Tomorrow and SEO and Jopwell are amazing students. They are some of the brightest students I've ever spoken to. So just partnering with them, creating webinars, creating different events to support their students is how we has helped us within our recruiting strategy and has helped us hire a lot of students from these different partner organizations as well.
Interesting. So Stephanie, you mentioned that, I think all of us have kind of talked about going to more universities, and if everybody does that, of course, there's going to be more competition, right? So the point is, what are you planning to do in terms of what you take as an offer to the students so that you're able to cut through the noise and stand out as an employer of choice?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that's sort of like keeping me up at night right now, like as we're planning for the fall, is like because everyone's thinking the same way. Everyone's like, great, we're going to do all these virtual events. And so I'm like, we are just one of the hundreds of companies that students are going to hear from. So I don't have a solid answer, but what we're thinking about, the number one thing is having a targeted approach to how we are talking and engaging with students is the most important thing, because I just have to continue to put myself in a student's shoes and say like, well, I'm a computer science major. I'm going to be getting all of these messages from companies. How can my message stand out and make them attend my event? And I think one thing is just being more personalized in our approach rather than just sending an email to hundreds of students at a time with the same message. So trying to be more personalized and getting to know people a little bit better so that we can be more personalized. And then also going back to Savona's point about what's the value add in your particular event or whatever you're proposing to them? Apply to my job or come to our event. What's the value in it for the student other than just listening to, you know, here's what Rapid7 does, here are opportunities. It's what are they going to get out of it? So whether it's hearing from alumni or resume tips and tricks, or even just like how to navigate this virtual recruiting environment. So any sort of value add that we can provide to students and even student organizations too, rather than just, hey, we want to recruit your talent. It's how can we help you guys, especially in this virtual world? So it's a challenge and it's something we're kind of navigating through, but I think that the more personalized that we can be, the better.
Got it. So I see the whole university recruiting, becoming more and more almost like a lateral recruiting. You'll be talking about, opening up the audience. We're talking about becoming more personal. We're talking about more about value. That's, some very interesting times from a recruiting perspective.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot similar to recruiting a senior person, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sivana, this one's for you. And I know we did touch upon that a little bit earlier, but just want to unpack that a bit more. So either we are going to be, I think all of us are going to be remote friendly. The question is how many of us are going to be remote first? And I really can't, put a finger on where we're going to be, but all of us are going to be remote friendly, which means that we are in general more open to hiring people who are not co-located. Now, if you put geography as a filter, one could say I'm mostly hired in and around my town now, but I'm going to, I'm happy to extend that to the state or say a bunch of states around my state. The other perspective is, oh, I'm open to the entire country, right? And then one extreme end of it is, and of course there are legal and various challenges around that. I don't care where the person is from. I'm fully remote. I'll hire anybody who's, as long as they can prove that they're good enough. So what is your thought today? What's the strategy? Where are you headed? And where do you think, you would draw a line and say, this is how geographically diverse we are willing to be, given a remote friendly work environment?
Yeah, I mean, my personal thoughts is I wish I could hire anyone, anywhere, at any place. But I guess legally, we can really just hire within the U.S. And then students who are here for school. So that's really like how city strategy is. And it's not every group that hires where students need to be sponsored, but most groups will hire a student who is worth it if they need to be sponsored.
Got it. And Alan, what's your take on this?
Kind of similar. One thing though that I really do want to I want to mention on Sivona's comment that for anybody listening that is actually at a university, one of the things I think they could do a great service to is really focus on their international students and how they can help them find jobs. Because when they're coming to the career fairs, we're not in a position to hire and to sponsor because of who our clients are. That said, I'm familiar, having worked in that realm before, where I'll point them to the companies at the career fair that I know sponsor. And I think that Caltech is a great example. They have one of the highest degrees of people who come from other areas of America, from outside of America, and yet instead of going home after 2 to 3 years, they stay in the States. And I think a college that can help us with that as well, if a company is in a position to sponsor, if they would do great things for that. For us, we have our industry, like many, but ours is an extremely small world, as big as construction is, and we are very, very much about relationships with the candidates, relationships with the universities, relationships with professors when appropriate, and we think there's a good thing to be had there, events, and that's really helped us over the years. And the thing for anybody they need to realize is this isn't COVID, oh, all of a sudden we can adjust and we're going to see results. Sivona and Stephanie and others, they realize we've been in this part of recruiting college for many years. It's a long game. And now you have an opportunity to maybe jumpstart where you've been, or you get to move forward where you've been. Take advantage of these next 12 months, this next 1 or 2 school years. No offense to Savona, but if I was in tech, now somebody like Stephanie's company might have an advantage of getting in touch with some students that maybe they might not have had a shot at before for geography, location, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think the big thing that's going to pose a challenge, and things we've been talking about when it comes to like casting a wider net, recruiting from schools in whatever location, is going to be like whether the company offers relocation packages, and do we assist, and then when do we talk about that in the recruitment process? Because in our traditional process, if we're recruiting at a local school, it's not really a big question, because it's like, hey, I'm in Boston, I'm at Boston College, our job is in Boston, and relocation doesn't really come up. And if it does, it's towards the end and it's just a shorter conversation. If now I'm at a school in Washington, D.C., and I find a great candidate, do I bring it up now? Because I need to know, like, are they going to relocate? And then the further discussion is, do we need to change our thoughts about relocation? Because if we are going to be casting a wider net. So tons of different challenges there when it comes to casting a wider net is great, and we're excited about it, but we also, like, we do not offer relocation other than like on a case-by-case basis. So that's going to change a little bit, and something we have to think about as we do go and try and recruit all this new talent that we haven't been able to touch before.
That's a very valid point about relocation, and you know, kind of tying it into what Alan said, we should be looking at this pandemic as an opportunity to see what are the things that we were not able to do earlier, but we've always believed could give us you know, better results. So we should start picking them up one by one, and then of course that would entail its own set of challenges. Like you said, relocation becomes an element that we have to factor in. So it's a long game. It's going to take time, and you know, there are a lot of things that we need to work around. So we're almost nearing towards the end of our discussion, and you know, 2 more questions. This one's for you, Stephanie and Alan. Traditionally, all rounds have happened in a day if you're doing interviews at the campus, or maybe 2 days. Now with virtual, you've got an opportunity to space it out potentially. So what's your take? Are you still putting them, compressing all of them in a single day from a candidate's perspective, or do you like to space it out?
And I can go first. So again, just going back to like Rapid7, and we're sort of building it as we go. Traditionally has not done like on-campus interviews all in one day. And that was part of like my recommendation when I started, was like, we got to do on-campus interviews. That's going to be so much more efficient. So we're going to try it out at a few different schools, and just, yes, compress into one day, and see how that works, but not limit ourselves to only those. So we still want to have, you know, phone interviews or Zoom first screens, whatever it might be, outside of those on-campus interviews, but we are still going to try it and see how it works, just from like an efficiency standpoint.
And we're kind of in the same boat. Prior to COVID, I think that it really also depended on the school. Some schools you do if they're local, you do the career fair today, and maybe you do the on-campus interviews next week after you've gone through a couple of things. Other schools, they've got the career fair set up in the morning, you have lunch, and then afterwards they've got it set up where you can do half an hour, 45-minute interviews right then and there. And we take advantage of those. So that kind of depends. For us, I think the timing issue is just sort of going to be on a case-by-case, school-by-school basis, where but they will be sort of still, I think, not really elongated, because the career fair season is kind of compressed in and of itself. We don't want to meet, say, Stephanie at career fair this week and meet Savona at career fair next week, and then we still have an interview. We still don't have Stephanie. We have neither of them in process, because we still have some more to go. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of flexibility because of the virtual thing, but you would still want that to be an activity that you start at a point in time and finish in a reasonable time frame.
And yes, and we're also, I'm very proud of our team and our company. We're very quick to act when we're selfish and we find somebody that we like. I've seen it gone as fast as fewer than 4 days from career fair to interview to intern offer to get it back to us and done. And if I was competing with these two great professionals, I'd have to be on my toes because I'd have to get there before they did.
4 days is pretty fast. You're definitely doing something great, Alan.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say we had a good process. We had a good process when we started. Our company is a lot about relationships. I'm very proud we have a good brand in the markets that we serve, and we were just yesterday we were awarded third year in a row, but number 7 in the 100 best places to work in Los Angeles by the Los Angeles Business Journal.
Congrats.
So we're not a ginormous company, but we like where we are.
Good. This is the last question for the discussion, and this one's for all of you. What do you, and I know that the answer could be, fairly open-ended, but if you could just pick 1 or 2 key insights that you've been thinking about and or either already implemented or plan to implement going forward from the future of university recruiting, like what particularly that being virtual. And we may have talked about this in the entire discussion of the panel. So if you could just summarize your thoughts. Plus, what would be your tip to our audience today? 1 or 2 things that they could do, take away, and go and implement in their processes to be better at what they do on a day-to-day basis. Maybe whoever wants to go first, we can start. I think I'll have to.
Yeah, you'll have to pick one.
Okay, go ahead, Alan. I'll start with you.
The 2 things I would say is for the talent acquisition and the companies, be open, be flexible. This is an opportunity where a rock's been dropped in a pond and change is going to happen. If you have throw some ideas out with your team, with your leadership, even if it sounds odd, try it right now. And for people at the university level, do the same. This is an opportunity for you to build your relations and your brand in being, a university is known for how many people apply. And you know what? On the back end, you have the great chance to improve hey, 50, 70, 80, 90% of our graduates have jobs before they graduate. This is a great opportunity for you to improve that. And so be open, be flexible, and look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll echo a lot of what Alan said, but just to mention my own, I think just I think traditionally what I've heard just from colleagues in campus recruiting, it's always been such a narrow approach. And I think that's been my theme this whole time is like, we've been so narrow. So just trying to get as recruiters to open up your mind to, different schools, different locations, different types of students, not being so, I've heard from people like, well, we have a, minimum GPA requirement and we only hire this major. And especially in those more competitive majors and more competitive schools, that's just going to get harder and harder. And especially in this virtual environment where we're going to be able to get those face-to-face interactions. So it's going to be harder. And so it's easier in a lot of ways. We can reach a lot more people, but if we're still looking for that narrow candidate pool, then we're really not getting anywhere. And so back to Alan's point, we have a really big opportunity here to make change. But it's going to take people being open-minded from a recruiting perspective and hiring managers and executives and leadership that have to kind of get behind that. It's up to us in talent acquisition to shift that mindset for them. So that's a huge takeaway. I hope that everyone can get from this today.
Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of what you guys said as well. Just like Alan said, change is inevitable. So right now is definitely the time to challenge the norm, challenge what we know, challenge how we recruit, challenge how we support students. You're touching students in the beginning of their career. So just thinking through all the ways that you can best support students, that you can best diversify your pipeline, and that you can challenge things that haven't necessarily been working. Similar to Stephanie said, like GPA, where we're recruiting, challenge all those things. Now is the time. And if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? Pretty much.
Thanks all of you for kind of summarizing those thoughts. If I were to just put my lens to what I've before that, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you guys. Thanks so much. You've been a wonderful panel. I'm sure the audience today has learned a lot of things from the discussion today. So I thank each one of you for your time. And just to kind of summarize from my perspective what I've heard from you guys. I think because of the whole pandemic, one could say, hey, it's a challenge. The other flip side of that is, hey, it's an opportunity, right? And we have an opportunity to do something, make something good out of it. And we as talent acquisition professionals are actually the change leaders, because we all know how hard it is to change a perspective of the hiring managers and the executive team who's been doing what they've been doing for years, right? But we're on the front lines, we're talking to people, we're talking to universities. So it's the responsibility lies on us to think out of the box, break some of the barriers that have existed in the past, and go back to our teams and do that hard job of convincing them. And as I said, make the best out of this opportunity. Of course, from a process perspective, things are going to change. There's little or no face-to-face interaction. So your virtual sessions have to be aligned to giving back even before you asking. I mean, like that's one of the concepts that's used widely in marketing, give back before you ask. So the same extends to the students. What are they getting out of spending an hour listening to your webinar? And in that process, to Alan's point, you end up building relationships, and that's what you tap into. And then of course, one thing that came consistently out was casting a wider net, and looking at some of the things that we may not have looked in the past. So absolutely enjoyed. Thanks a lot, guys. I think what I just need to do is we'll open up for a poll, so you guys could stay on or choose to drop off. But absolutely enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
did you say you need us to stay on?
No, it's up to you. If you want to, you can drop off.
Okay. I've got a couple of minutes. I don't know if you want to continue doing what you're doing for me.
Yeah. So just for the audience, I wanted to quickly talk about some of the things that we do as HackerEarth and where we could help organizations from a university recruiting perspective. So we've got 3 offerings. The first is, and I would have loved to touch upon this during the panel, but we help organizations in hosting hackathons. So these hackathons could be from a talent branding perspective. It could be about crowdsourcing interesting ideas and solutions for your core business problems. And given that everybody is going virtual, one of the ways that you could engage with university talent is through the medium of the hackathons. And that doesn't necessarily is to be positioned as a sourcing or a recruiting event, but it's just about, hey, this is the kind of interesting work that we do at our organization, and these are some of the interesting problems that we're working on. And then you invite students to participate. Students love participating in hackathons for multiple reasons. They get to work on interesting problems. It goes into their resume. They can talk about it, and most importantly, they learn something. So that's something that we can help organizations in building the top of the mind recall with the university crowd. And then, of course, from a screening and interviewing perspective, we have a skill assessment software that can be used by organizations to run coding tests before they do the first round of interviews. And like we spoke about casting a wider net, if you have 300 people who are interested, now how do you really narrow it down to the top 30, because you can't really interview all of them. So the take-home tests allow you to screen relevant candidates in your recruiting funnel. And then finally, for tech interviews, Zoom or any other tool is clumsy to use. It's not the best experience. Right? Because you want people to be able to write code, you want to have interactions around code, and nobody wants to do that in a Google Doc. So part of the tool that we have is that allows the hiring manager and the candidates to write code collaboratively, and that makes the entire experience a lot more interesting and good for the candidate. And of course, it brings the best out of those guys in their performance, and hiring managers are able to assess the candidates better. So from sourcing and top of the funnel branding to filtering down the candidates to actually interviewing, We've got solutions all across the board. So we'll be opening up a poll. Anybody who wants to give feedback or is interested in demo, please feel free to give your responses.